Nicole. I'm going to read you a work in progress story. The first half is called Mind the Pixies in the River. My mother, who comes from a small village in Poland, used to tell me how the gypsies waiting by the river would refuse to read her fortune. They would thumb through their tarot cards, fluffy at the edges from use, and shake their heads. Witch, they called her, as they waved their hands in the air, as if to shoo away her evil spirits. When she protested, they just repeated themselves and turned away. Why were there gypsies in Simatize? I asked. You're missing the point, she said. I get the point, I replied. I just don't understand why they were there in the first place. Why do you ask such stupid questions, Mira? She turned and stirred the pot, the blue flame underneath it lowered to a simmer. There have always been gypsies by the river. You just don't notice them. A sweet, sickly smell emanated from it. I watched the steam curling towards the ceiling, less than a metre above our heads. I am asking my mother about the gypsies who used to pass through this town, I translated to my then-boyfriend Daniel, who was cleaning his glasses with his t-shirt and smiling faintly, the way he had when he'd approached me in a pub in King's Cross, and I told him he could buy me a tomato juice. Watching him, I decided bringing him back to Poland, to my mother, had not been a good idea. He pretended not to glance around the kitchen, at the cracks where the steam drifted towards the ceiling, at the chipped, colourful china bowls, at the dream catcher my mother hung above the back garden door. Is that right, he said. I thought you only got gypsies in Spain and what have you. I was glad that my mother could not understand English, even though it forced her to smile and act in a manner that she claimed made her a simpering fool. I was 34 when I brought Daniel to Simatize, and so she had high hopes it would bring her first and only grandchildren, clambering over the worn patches in the sofa and screaming and fighting in 2 languages. That was why she was making borscht. I did not tell her I had no plans to speak to my children in Polish. I did not tell her I doubted I wanted children at all. Ask Daniel if he wants extra red onion, she said. She pronounced his name with the stress on the second syllable. I corrected her. Daniel perked up at the sound of his mispronounced name. What was that, he asked. My mother wishes to know if you want plenty of onions. Daniel looked helplessly at me. The legs of the wooden chair, spindly at the best of times, creaked under his weight. I'm good with whatever you're having, he said. Tell him not to tip the chair like that, my mother said. I don't want to be rude, you know. I rose from the table and at the stove lifted the lid of the pot. No onions, I said, peering into the bubbling liquid. She tutted under her breath and I said, I'm the one who has to kiss him, aren't I? This brought on a sharp cackle. I smiled, pleased with myself. I stirred the pot and said, were they right, the gypsies? Is that why you didn't dye your hair black when Misha was ill? Mira, she sighed. If I had, he wouldn't be alive. She burst into sudden laughter as I returned to the table, and after a moment I joined in. Daniel grinned hopefully, wanting to be in on the joke. I patted his hand sympathetically, but did not translate. When her laughter subsided, hiccuping raggedly into silence, she wiped her hands on a tea towel and said, You shouldn't dye your hair black either. I know, I said. She turned off the gas. The flame flared blue momentarily and then sputtered out. Food is ready, she announced loudly, in English. To me, almost as an afterthought, she said, You can do it most of the time, just not when someone is ill. I know, I repeated. My mother nodded and came towards us with 3 deep china bowls, red patterns swirled across the bottom. Daniel jumped up and gathered them from her outstretched hands. Good, she said, watching him hurrying to place utensils on the woven table mats. Good. Years later, when Daniel was long gone, along with a string of other temporary boyfriends, I stepped past a cafe advertising borscht. A photo of chunks of beetroot, similar to my new hair colour, gleamed in the glass of the window. I was reminded of our conversation, reminded that I hadn't been back to Simatize since the previous winter. Last time I'd visited, the river had frozen over. It had dried to a thin stream, and the rest was ice. That conversation with my mother wasn't unusual. Though we talked less and less as we aged, when we spoke, we discovered we shared the same intuition. We kept white feathers before exams or doctor's appointments. Black feathers, of course, were warnings. You absolutely should not fly the same day if you found one. There was no need to lock your front door if you hung scissors on the handle. We knew these to be facts, as empirical as science. That morning, I stood staring at the photo of steaming borscht and thinking of my mother, my own reflection half-formed ghostly in the dull morning lights. I was late for work and I didn't move until I saw the waiter inside watching me. He raised a hand as if to wave me in, but I turned and clopped away in my high-heeled boots, sidestepping the brown sludge that clung to the pavements. Though I was taller than most women, I made a point of wearing high heels wherever I could. St. John's Wood near enough demanded it. I liked also the way they sounded on the tiled floors of the beauty salon, announcing my presence. Here I was, in London, a Londoner. I flipped my burnt red hair over my shoulder and towered over the other girls. There were several clients in the salon by the time I arrived, and the girls glanced frostily over their shoulders at the cold air that gusted into the room. A beeping above my head sounded as I entered. My heels made sharp, loud clunks, audible above the radio. Morning, I called as I stamped my boots on the entrance mat. Some of them murmured replies. Anna glanced up from the reception desk, her eyes flitting to my own, then away again. We need you for Botox, she said. When I moved closer, she murmured, she's back again. She says she wants only you. She inclined her head towards the leather sofas at the entrance. She's been waiting 15 minutes. The other girls are just standing around. Got it, I said, though I really wanted a coffee and to flip through the new magazines that arrived on Mondays. Instead, I turned towards the sofas where I smiled widely at Angela. Her collagen-enhanced lips smiled back. I've been desperate to see you, she said. She stood, came towards me, gazed up into my face, literally mirror counting the days. I wished for my boyfriend to tell me that, I responded, as I always did, with some variation on the theme. I had no boyfriend, but it made her laugh, though her skin didn't crease and my only proof was a throaty gurgle. Outside, through the glass windows, a crow settled on a lamppost. It flapped its wings once, twice, its feathers ruffling and engorging its neck. I need you to work your magic on me, she said, touching my arm. I don't know how Howard can stand to look at me, I really don't. That is nonsense, I told her, but we can make you even more beautiful. I pressed a gentle palm on her back, steering her towards the treatment rooms. Outside the windows, another crow joined the first. From here I couldn't see if their black feathers had dropped onto the pavement. The morning passed the way it always did, in gossip, in laundering the small white hand towels, of tearing off long rolls of fabric to place on the reclining couches. Clients entered and we smoothed their skin and erased their wrinkles. They left shiny and fragrant and oiled, happier versions of themselves. Miracle workers, they called us, as they slipped pound coins into our uniform pockets. Those who booked appointments with me were generous. It was well known amongst the other girls that I got the best tips. At just after 2 o'clock in the post-lunch break lull, the door beeped and I was blasted with fresh, cold air. I was at the back by the sinks, replacing the wax in the containers, but I still felt the cold. It travelled through the room, lingering until I shivered and looked up. Outside, the sky had darkened to the colour of melted snow. It had begun to rain again, and light drops glanced off the windows. I sensed a dark movement from the corner of my eye, and when I checked the lamppost, it was bare. The crows had flown off. I felt an inexplicable, near overwhelming sense of relief, and in response, it seemed, the lamppost light switched on in a sudden burst of brightness. It quickly faded, though, flickering against the muddy clouds. It buzzed on, off. Could you close the door, Anna said. Her back was to me and she obscured the person in the doorway. I waited until the door dropped back into its frame and returned to filling the wax pots. I'm looking for something, a woman's voice said, or someone, I'm not sure. Do you have an appointment? Anna asked. No, nothing like that. The lady was well spoken, unusually so in fact, and I stepped from behind the sinks to get a better look. I just needed to come in here, that's all. Okay, Anna said after a pause. Well, now you're here, which treatment would you like? The woman didn't respond. I stood at the back watching her. She wore an expensive-looking wool coat, and her thick, dark hair was twisted and plaited cleanly at the side, the hairstyle of a schoolgirl, though she appeared to be in her 40s. She had fastened the end with some kind of silver clasp, and as she moved, slowly rotating on the spot, it glimmered in the lights, making prisms on the tiles. Her head jerked to the left and right and up to the ceiling, roving over the faces of the girls, some of who were holding back laughter as they stood watching her. Anna warned them with a curt motion of her head. Perhaps a mani-pedi, Chantal offered, or we do a great blow-dry, maybe you want your hair done. There were stifled giggles, but the woman appeared not to notice. She continued searching the salon, her eyes rolling over the walls. Chantal, Anna murmured. Again, the woman didn't react. There was something dazed about her expression. She kept blinking as she looked around her, and I considered the possibility she was quite mad. I felt remorse, hot and sudden, for watching her in the way I was, the way I might stare at a car crash. Her expression reminded me of my mother when she told me her childhood stories. The words were well rehearsed, but her jaw went slack. She blinked rapidly. She stared at things I couldn't see. Turning away, I clopped back to the sinks. The sound filled the silence. The woman's eyes, fixed on mine, gained strong, sudden focus. Her, she said, pointing at me with a force that caused me to take a step back. Mirror? Anna asked. Chantal rolled her eyes, but I barely noticed. The woman was already stepping lightly across the salon towards me. I felt a mild tension mounting in my stomach. Anna followed, hurrying to catch up. Mira is a skilled beautician, she said. She could do nails, facials, Botox, waxing, whatever you like. I tried to smile at the woman who was now standing in front of me, looking up. It doesn't matter, she said. She didn't smile back. Through the windows, the lamplight buzzed off, then sputtered back into life. Her eyes, the colour of slate, of the sky outside, signalled impatience. Whatever you suggest. How about a bespoke luxury facial? Anna suggested, hedging her bets. It's £225, but it includes LED light therapy and a rejuvenating skin feel. Its effects have been shown to... Yes, that's fine, the woman said. Mira is our best. I'm sure, the woman said, though the information did not appear to interest her. She clasped her hands together and silver rings on her fingers flashed in the light. Can we do it now, she asked. I tried to catch Anna's eye, but she was moving to the reception desk and consulting the schedule. We'll be a bit tight, she called back to us. You have another facial at 4, perhaps one of the other girls can... That's fine, the woman said. That's plenty of time. It's not enough time for the full treatment, I said. The woman looked at Anna, then back at me. That's perfectly all right, she said calmly. The drizzle outside became hail, drumming against the roof above our heads. Through the windows, I watched the stones slamming onto umbrellas, bursting with violence onto the pavement. We'll be finished by then, the woman said. The hairs on my arms stood on end. To me, she said, shall we begin? That's the end of the first half.